Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to HitScan. That is going to take some getting used to. Patch 1.41 had a lot of changes to a lot of heroes, 13 to be exact. And I remember when this patch was announced, a lot of people turned around and said, this isn't good enough, and that these changes weren't going to have any significant impact. Well, in this video, I wanted to go over why I felt that this patch, now that we have all of the stats, was much more impactful and much more impressive from Blizzard than people gave it credit for. Did it fix everything wrong with the game? No. Could more have been done to certain heroes? Absolutely. Did the patch change a lot of areas that have been significantly overlooked? Definitely. I made this video now because it's been a couple of weeks since that patch came out and I've had a chance to play all of the heroes that have been changed and really noticed the differences between them. And I think the one that has the biggest noticeable change, and certainly the biggest nerf I feel, is Sigma. Sigma's nerfs were pretty substantial in this patch, specifically around his experimental barrier. The regeneration rate was reduced from 175 to 150 per second, but most importantly, it had a 1 second cooldown after recalling the barrier. This made playing Sigma feel very clunky, and understandably, not a lot of people like this, and you can start seeing that when you look at overbuff and the pick rate changes. You can even see when that patch came in just because of how much of a drop there was. To give context, across all of the tiers, Sigma had about a 7% pick rate, which nowadays would make him the second most popular hero at the moment. Now he's dropped to 4% and in 4th place on popularity. Not a huge drop, but a drop nonetheless, which is why I think that this is a pretty good change for Sigma. Across all of the heroes that Blizzard have decided to nerf, they haven't completely gutted any of them, other than perhaps Symetra, which we'll get onto. Even in GM, his pick rate dropped, but it's still starting to rise again, as he is still one of the major options in the meta, and speaking to a few pros, they're still running Orisa Sigma the majority of the time. I definitely agree with those that said that these changes to Sigma make him feel very clunky. It feels pretty awful to play, or at least it did to begin with, but as time has gone on, I've personally started to get used to it, and I like the fact that the barrier now has to become a bit more deliberate from players with you and your shield usage. If you don't do that and you're not careful with where you're placing shields, you'll be punished for it, and I think that's a fair bet with Sigma because he's still very strong. Sigma felt that he had too many get out of jail free cards, and having this 1 second cooldown on his shield does give an opportunity for enemies to break on through. The good part is that Sigma is still incredibly strong, does a surprising amount of damage, and is still the best option to be running as an off tank at the moment. But Blizzard nerfing Sigma in this capacity has opened up the door for many other options across all of the tiers, the main one of course being Roadhog. Roadhog got an extra bit of ammunition, and with how the game is based around barriers at the moment, this has been a huge help. Looking across the stats, you can see again that Roadhog has risen up in the same amount. A lot of this stuff that we went over with a video with Miska earlier this week, but that trend is continuing to rise. But like I said a minute ago, Sigma's nerf opened the door for lots of other options that are being played at the moment. Winston got buffed, with his barrier projector having a duration increase and health increase, and that's even helped him a little bit. Not a huge amount, but he is played a little bit more, and to be honest, I'm seeing a lot more Winston in my games at the moment than I certainly did before. D.Va was also on the list of changes, a pretty impactful buff to be honest with how often she could use defense matrix, but looking at stats it really hasn't gone anywhere, and I think that's just because the other off tanks are a lot more stronger at this point in time with how the meta is working. Basically, I wouldn't want to see D.Va buffed again anytime soon. She's pretty good, but just not as good as some of the others. Zarya and Reinhardt are pretty consistent in how often they are picked. Reinhardt having just a good pick rate as Orisa and Sigma across all of the tiers for this month, so he's doing fine, personally. But Orisa's one that I definitely wanted to cover. This was one of the changes that I think Blizzard could have been a bit more aggressive with. They upped the protective barrier cooldown from 9 seconds to 10, barely noticeable. Even looking at the stats, it's just consistent with how popular she is, pretty much across all of the tiers. With that said, I don't really enjoy playing her, and a good amount of my games, a lot of the players on my team don't enjoy playing her as well. So the good thing about being in a lot of tiers is that people sort of avoid the meta. So Orisa isn't played an awful lot, Reinhardt, Zarya get played a bit, Sigma does too. A lot of the options are pretty consistent in the tank tier, but that's not to say that Orisa couldn't do with a couple more nerfs. Either to the damage she does, her shield health, the duration again. I think all parts of Orisa's kit could be hit in some capacity. But I do appreciate that Blizzard didn't just go in and completely destroy Orisa. but I would hope that after BlizzCon we'll see another nerf hit the road too. But that was the point of this patch. It wasn't to completely destroy Orisa Sigma, it wasn't to obliterate the meta as we know it now. These changes on the tanks were just simply there to tip the scale for you to perhaps pick up a bit more Winston or Wrecking Ball or D.Va. With how popular the likes of Reinhardt and Zarya are in the competitive ladder, you don't really realistically need to change up much, you just need to give players incentive to play the other tanks. Especially with a lot of people saying that Orisa is just incredibly boring to play, and I would definitely agree on that front. So I know it doesn't feel like much, and I know more could be done, but for the tanks especially, there's a bit more freedom of what you can play. And there's even evidence of that with the pick rates, and also from my personal experience. I can't remember the last time that I played Orisa Sigma, and even when I did we win because of it? No, not at all. So that in itself is one of the reasons why I think this patch was much more impactful than people gave it credit for. But we haven't even spoken about the DPS and the support options, which are much more fluid. Moira and Lucio are the most meta options for support, but in regards to the other ones, it's pretty close and you can mix and match whichever ones that you want depending on what you want to play. It's only Zenyatta and Brigitte that are suffering a bit at the moment, but that's not to say that they're useless all of the time. Speaking of Lucio, he actually got buffed, or at least reverted from previous changes that were meant to counter goats. You wall ride a lot slower, but your crossfade speed boost has been increased 5% normally, and 10% when you amp it up. The thing about this change is it hasn't really had an impact on Lucio at all. It's important and it's made Lucio very strong in certain regards, but it's had zero impact on his pick rate. And the same thing can be said for Moira, who actually got nerfed. Her self-healing was reduced from 30 to 20 health per second using your grasp, and yet again, as you see on screen, very little impact. Baptiste got a nerf to his immortality field with the health being decreased from 250 to 200. Yet again, not a very impactful dip. You can see when the dip came in though, he's one of the lesser popular supports, but he's still very good in the right hands. And Mercy as well was buffed recently. Now her Valkyrie healing can go through shields, but it's had very little impact on her pick rate at all. But like I said, whilst Moira and Lucio is really strong, you can mix and match whatever supports you want, and there's no need to have cadence towards it. There are certain situations where you'll want a lot of healing for your team with the likes of Mercy and Anna, certainly specific character healing focusing on one person, but having speed boost with Lucio, support ultimates, they're all big decisions that you need to make as a support player, but you're not really tied down to anything completely. As you climb up, you can have more people say go Moira or go Lucio, but you can make Baptiste work, you can make Anna work, and I'd say that the support meta in general is actually really good and a lot of fun. Going back onto the Baptiste point, I've been playing him a lot and I even forgot that he was nerfed with his immortality field health. It's just such an unnoticeable change, but I still think it's a fair one. It makes a lot of sense why they changed that. But you can still have really big plays with the ability, you can still be punished if you do it badly. And so the support meta was already pretty good before this. Granted, Moira Lucio is ahead of everybody, but it's not oppressive like it is for the tanks. It used to be that Orisa Sigma was so good, playing anything else was considered throw-in. Across the majority of the tiers, that's not really the case anymore after this patch, and the supports have a little bit more freedom. DPS is a relatively similar story because there's so many options that you can have in your DPS pairing, you can pick and choose on what you want to run. I've seen people run all sorts of stuff, even the non-meta options for the likes of Sombra, who we'll come back to, Soldier, Pharah, Ashe, all really decent options in the right hands, even though they're not necessarily popular or stand out in this meta. The most standout hero, I suppose DPS wise, would be Doomfist, who did get nerfed. His Rocket Punch time to reach max charge was increased to 1.4 seconds from 1, and the best defense passive that you get gaining shields from when you do damage, shield per hit now instead of 35, and much like some of the other changes that we've gone over, you can notice when that patch came in and his pick rate is starting to drop. Now saying that though, Doomfist is still a very strong hero and can be the match winner in a lot of given scenarios. He is still very strong in the right hands, worth picking up if you can play him. He just gets away with a little bit less and is required a bit more of him in order to fully punch targets with his Rocket Punch. I did notice a difference when I was playing him, but I wouldn't necessarily say that these changes were unfair to the point that they gutted Doomfist. They just made him a little bit worse, which I think is justified considering he's not necessarily a problem in his meta, it's Orisa. I definitely agree with Chipsa when he said that. Tracer's fall off was increased a little bit to 13 meters, up from 10. She doesn't have to be as close to targets to nail them with deadly damage, and because of that it makes her a better assassin in this meta. I've seen a lot more Tracer players in my games do a lot more, and as you can expect, her pick rate did jump up a little bit, not a huge amount. She used to have a pick rate that was similar to Soldier, who was like third from bottom in pick rate and popularity. She's not much higher, but I do feel like this is one of those areas that's going to go up, much like Sombra's pick rate, who also got a buff. The cooldown of the translocator was increased to 6 seconds, but the cooldown now begins immediately upon deploying the beacon, or if it's killed by an enemy, meaning that there's a bit more tempo to Sombra, and I want to highlight this in another video, because Sombra is starting to be used by the pros. We saw this in the Gauntlet. The Sombra Doomfist combination was always really strong and always deadly. It may come back in a big fashion, and I think we're going to see this at the World Cup. This is an easy change to sort of sniff at go. This hasn't really done much for the hero. Sombra doesn't need much in order for her to be meta. She slowly climbs up, much like Doomfist, and before you know it, she's hacking you from behind, going nothing personal, kid. You are never going to see Sombra just jump up in popularity very quickly. This will be a slow climb, but I do think that these changes have impact. They're just not noticeable yet. The only supposed negative I think of this patch where Blizzard may have gone too hard on a particular character was Symetra, who was nerfed. The duration of Photon Barrier, her ultimate, was reduced to 12 seconds. The health was also reduced to 4,000 from 5k. I think that's the fair one, to be honest. The ultimate was very obnoxious. The sentry turret damage was decreased from 50 to 40. This was, again, easy to sniff at go, there's not much impact here. But Symetra's pick rate is starting to drop, and has been dropping over the past couple of months or so. It was at a rise at about 3% pick rate, which would have given a similar pick rate to Reaper, which shows how strong Symetra was in ranked. But now she's at about 1%, just a little bit better than Tracer. I've seen a lot of Symetra players sort of poke up and say, are you going to talk about this? Because it's kind of a big deal for us Symetra players, which I get. I'm just surprised that nobody's really noticed that Symetra has dropped off quite a lot. I didn't mind Symetra being too meta, to be honest. The ultimate I did think needed nerfing, but maybe not the duration and the health of it. Maybe one or the other. I'm not too sure. But I think that's the only change that I realistically don't like out of all of the ones I went over, other than nerfing a reset a little bit more. But this is a complete breakdown and a review of the recent patch that went out with the changes to the 13 heroes that we've highlighted. And now it's been a couple of weeks since our patch has gone live. I think it's safe to say that it's had a lot of impact, and whilst yes they could have gone harder in certain areas, I'm really glad that they put a patch out like this. There just needs to be more like this. BlizzCon's going to make it very quiet for now, but maybe afterwards we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching, take care, we'll see you next time.